Welcome to Generations at Work, where our goal is to build bridges and not walls between the different generations in the workplace. Today, we're going to discuss vulnerabilities in the workplace with a millennial. Before we dive in, if you're interested in leading multi-generational teams, or maybe you want a workshop or some coaching for your leaders, you can contact us right in the show notes. We'll have a contact information for us. We also have some bonus materials as well as a Generations at Work playbook. All of these are valuable free resources for you. Again, just click down here in the show notes and we'll get that information to you. I'm your host, Susan Davis, Maxwell Leadership Executive Facilitator and Coach. And with us, we have your generational expert, Dr. Tim Elmore. Tim, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Susan. I'm looking forward to this one.
Yeah. So, Tim, I'm excited about today's topic. We're not just talking about weakness. We're not talking about vulnerabilities.
Yeah.
What are we really hoping today our listeners are going to get out of our episode?
Yeah, Susan, it's a great question. So you and I decided, our team had decided a while back that it might be great just to listen to representatives from each of the four generations that we know are coming to work today to help leaders build empathy in their leadership, where they're not just barking out orders, but they're leading with a greater sense of empathy and compassion for their people. We want to help leaders better understand what's beneath behavior. I have come to believe that all behavior has a reason. If my kids do something, there's usually a bad reason maybe, but there's a reason for it. And then creating workplaces that people feel seen and heard and valued and supported. And then finally, we want to turn vulnerabilities as we discover them into bridges of connection. So we've already heard from a Gen Zer. I can hardly wait to talk to Jodie today, who represents the 80 million millennials that are in the United States right now.
Our largest generation.
That's right.
Tim,
yeah.
When we say vulnerabilities, we're not meaning flaws or deficiencies.
Yeah.
We're talking about, fears that they may not voice, right? Or unspoken pressures they might carry. What are some other things that we're referencing here?
Yeah. Well, Susan, I'm thinking about my own two adult children. They're both in their 30s. They are from the millennial generation. We have been throwing this generation under the bus for 15 years. But we've now seen, oh my gosh, they are the largest generation in the workplace. But my own kids have even said, Dad, I don't know if I'll ever be able to afford a home like you and Mom, or have the lifestyle you and Mom have. And the economy right now and the inflation rates are just different. So it doesn't mean we give excuses to every generation for being not as good as they ought to be, but it's just creating better leaders through better empathy and understanding. So that's what I think we're going to get today when we talk to Jodie. Yeah.
Well, that's exciting. Well, let's jump in. I want to introduce Jodie to our audience here. Jodie is our guest today, and Jodie is our Gen Y or millennial. And Jodie comes from an organization called Decker's Brand. And a lot of people may know them from UGG and Hoka and Teva. But Jodie is the Senior Director of Global Talent and Practices and Learning Experiences. She's an industrial and organizational psychologist, and she brings a wealth of information and experience in talent management, learning, and leadership development across both public and private corporations. And we're excited to have you, Jodie. Welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here with you, Susan and Tim.
Well, we're excited. Well, let's jump in. It's almost kind of weird to say because I always felt like the millennials were the young ones, right? But you're now approaching kind of midlife. And as Tim mentioned, you're the largest generation in the workforce, 80 million strong. And it kind of sounds strange to say you're approaching midlife. But, how has your perspective shifted from earlier days at work to where you are now?
Such a good question. And Susan, you're helping me with some of this in our relationship with you being my coach, which is fantastic. But I would say, just for a little context, when I joined the workforce in my early 20s, I worked for an over 100-year-old retailer. That was my first kind of gig in the talent management space, if you will. And I remember we had these classes about generations, and I went through one, and I realized it was a whole class about how to teach the boomers and Gen X about how to deal with millennials, like how to deal with me.
Yeah.
And I remember sitting in that class and thinking, this is really weird. It feels like it's being brought up as sort of a bad word. I never really heard millennial talked about in a positive way.
Yeah, yeah,
It was more like, how do we deal with them? Was really the context. And then I also remember from my time there that I had someone who I admired who gave me the advice that, nobody's going to take you seriously till you're in your 30s. So, just don't worry about it. Right. And so I remember realizing really early on that, okay, my generation and my age are things that are seen as a weakness
yeah,
to me in my career. And so I sort of put on this armor and started to try to model those Gen X behaviors and like really started getting hyper focused and aware of how they would show up in the workplace, even boomers, the leaders who were, you know, really paving the way and setting the strategy for our organization. Um, and didn't want people to know I was a millennial and didn't want people to know my age and sort of just put that armor on and acted tough and spoke up and wanted to be really visible. And I think what happened is I thought visibility equaled value. Um, and that, being seen equated how much Jodie is valuable. But now I'm learning that that's not the case. And so, I'm kind of shedding some of those beliefs that were shaped by my early experience in the workplace. And I have a lot of empathy for my Gen Z friends who are kind of, they're going through it now too. Yeah. It's hard being in your 20s, right? Every
yeah,
generation that's in their 20s, we're
yeah,
like, oh, what do we do with them?
yeah, yeah.
You know?
So true.
Tim, what have you found with interviewing the many, many, many millennials that you've interviewed in your focus groups? Is what you're hearing from Jodie pretty accurate?
Absolutely. I don't want to generalize, but Jodie, I hear this all the time. All the articles that you would have read a decade ago about millennials, kids today, and you're right. If you were listening in, you thought, am I diseased? What's wrong here? But
Absolutely.
yeah, but your generation was showing up different. You were raised in a different world, time, and culture than my generation was. But I do remember my own daughter, who is 37 now. She asked me last summer, am I ever going to be able to afford a home? Now, clearly millennials are getting homes, but there was that question mark. And there wasn't in my generation. We all knew eventually, yeah, we're going to get one, and it may be in our 20s. So I just have been bettered by listening to your generation, Jodie, and realizing it's a little different now. I need to not impose my assumptions about how it was for me on you. It's just not smart. Yeah.
Good. So Jodie, as a millennial, you're no longer, the new kid on the block, right? You've now this midlife. So you're sandwiched between the Gen Xer, right? And then the Gen Zers. Do you ever feel like you're the person building the bridge or the translator between those two? Or how does that feel as a millennial?
If you're listening, you can't see me shaking my head.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. I actually, I have a term for this. I call it the squeeze
The squeeze.
because there's sort of this squeeze that happens between when I'm interacting with Gen X leaders and Gen Z, where when I'm operating with a leadership team, we have to be short, clear, to the point, in and out, give them what they need and move on, right? And when I'm working with my Gen Z team members or even coaching other leaders on how to do that, they need more context, they need more guidance, they want to understand the why, they want to understand how they connect in. And that means you have to slow down. You have to slow down and check in with your heart before you check in with your head with a Gen Z team member. And with Gen X, if I do that, I lose them. We can get to the heart, but I have to get to their head first versus, there's sort of a flip flop. And so, yeah, I do. I think I like the way you said translator. And I think millennials are really, really good at that. I think we can help people understand the needs of different generations because we've kind of been in different
Yeah.
situations and seen a lot of different things. And one thing I'm doing lately in my work and in my career is really focusing on transparency because I think that helps everybody.
Yeah. Yeah.
So as an example, we used to, send a communication to leaders and then send a communication to employees. Now I'm really pushing for, let's have one communication so employees know what their leaders are held accountable for. And they, they can see that and they know what we're asking of them. But leaders also know, hey, employees are getting the same information. So it's going to
Yeah.
make it really easy to talk about this in a
Yeah.
touch base.
Yeah.
We have like common context and understanding.
I like that.
Yeah.
So, Jodie, what do you think, or what do you believe, I guess, that your generation brings to the organization? And based on just where you are in your life station, but other generations may not realize it. So maybe Gen X, Boomer, or even a Gen Zer. What are you bringing?
That's no pressure. How many millennials did you say there are, Tim?
80 million.
80 million. Okay. Okay, friends.
Yeah.
I'll try to speak for the 80 million. You know, what I see Gen Z doing really well is sort of picking up on what I think millennials started, which is like bringing this, really valuing the why, the mission and the purpose of an organization. Gen Z is demanding it.
Yeah.
And they don't join organizations unless they're
Yeah.
really connected in with their purpose. But I think millennials really started a lot of that. And I think it may go back to what you're talking about, Susan, with this translator and the squeeze of like, how do we bridge where we were and where we're going as just as a whole workforce? I think millennials can help in that space and help leaders understand how to connect that bigger mission and purpose and why with, down to the team member level.
That's good. That's
Tim,
good.
what do you think? And to all the research that you've done, what do you think is the millennials? What are they offering to the organizations?
I think it's huge. And by the way, I remember 15 years ago writing about the millennials when they were the new kids on the block. And I could see both sides. They're bringing some new stuff, but how come they're so different? But let's go back to that word translator for just a minute. When I have been overseas and I'm speaking from the platform and I have a translator or an interpreter, the value they bring is they can not only speak the language of the audience, and I don't, that's why I have them, but they know what I'm trying to say. They're savvy enough to know, I know what Dr. Tim's trying to say right here. And so that might not be word for word, but it is thought for thought. They're saying in an idiom that will be understandable to the audience, making sure they convey that's what millennials do. I know what the Gen Xer is trying to say, but I dare not say it the same way they are, because I will cause World War III to break out right now.
Yeah.
But if I can say it in a way that could be receivable by that 23-year-old, and they can get it, and I see why. And maybe Jodie, your generation is saying, can I share with you what the supervisor's feeling right now? I think she's feeling blah, 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 blah. And you can understand that, can't you? And they would go, of course I can. So you're really bridge, translator, interpreter. I think the millennials for the next several years really must play that role between old and young. And I think that is priceless for organizations if we can take advantage of it. Yeah.
I love that. And I think maybe as I'm reflecting here, in working for different generations, I think when they pull me in and I'm adding the most value, it is in that translator role in terms of helping their vision come to life in a way where it's going to stick and resonate with the whole workforce. So I'll get like, here's the vision, here's what I'm trying to do. Can you help make this stick and make sense? So I do see at least myself personally getting pulled in that capacity a lot.
Yeah. I like how you brought up transparency. If you don't mind, Susan, I want to hijack this, but
No,
I
please.
love that you brought that out. Everybody seems to be writing on this. I don't know if enough leaders are practicing it. So one of the metaphors that benefits me a lot as an older leader is the metaphor of the guide dog and the guard dog. So a guard dog is protecting and barking and sniffing out intruders. The guide dog is going first, right? They have somebody that can't see very well, and they're going first and leading the way and being vulnerable and being transparent, that sort of thing for a canine. I feel like millennials can be that guide dog because you do still feel what it means to be young. You're not old yet, but you also been around the block long enough to know, I know what the company's trying to do right now.
Yes.
How do I find a way to convey this to that young whippersnapper that's joined the team, and we don't
Yeah.
want to lose them. But right now, they're so feeling like they're not understood by the boss. They don't know the mental health anguish I am going through right now, or whatever it is. I don't know. I don't want to stereotype, but they feel misunderstood. The boss feels misunderstood. Jodie, I think you might understand both sides. And I just keep going back to, if you can be a guide dog and go first in that meeting and say, I think what we're trying to accomplish here, and I think the misunderstanding we're having is dot, dot, dot,
Yes.
that could be huge. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very good.
And it takes a lot of emotional energy to
It
do
does.
that. I think
Yeah.
that's our vulnerability
Yeah.
probably for millennials is the emotional,
You're
toll
right.
that it takes to switch and have that situational communication and, are we doing head or heart? Like
Yep. So true.
what does
You
this
know which
person
one.
need? I'm very aware of that all the time. And I think it does probably take a toll to be on in
No
that
doubt.
way.
Yeah.
And I think what I probably value in Gen X is the authenticity.
Wow. Yeah.
Authenticity and just, it is what it is.
Yeah.
Like, we got
Yeah.
to go.
This is the deal.
So,
Yeah. Yeah.
we have to get this done. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, I don't know. It's
Well,
interesting.
I want to volley back, Jody. I love what you just said. It is emotional energy that maybe you weren't saying, I signed up for this, but can I go back to the translator? I'll be in Brazil this summer, and the same translator is going to translate for me for all 6 meetings. He will be way more worn out than I will be. I just
Yes.
said it in English. He's thinking in English and then thinking in Portuguese. He's way more emotionally spent. It is expensive. But millennials listening, if you can just ride this train for a little while, one
Yeah.
day you'll get to be the older folks. But if you can spend that emotional energy and be emotionally intelligent in these, conveying those ideas, I'm telling you, you may save the future for the organization you work with, because the Zers will leave if they don't feel understood, and the Xers will get frustrated if they don't feel like they're getting the results they need. So,
Absolutely.
all right, I'll stop preaching here, but I think that's what we need to do. Yeah.
Well, and Jody, you brought up vulnerabilities as a great bridge, because I personally think vulnerabilities are superhero powers. So a lot of, but a lot of people don't. They almost look at that word
Yeah.
as a cuss word a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't want a lot of people to see that. But so I'm going to ask you, get vulnerable here. So I'm going to put you on the spot. Tell me, in your professional, where do you feel the most vulnerable professionally?
Mm. Well, I do see vulnerability as a curse word.
I know.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it's because the millennials were seen in such a negative connotation.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
ooh, don't complain and make it
Yeah.
worse, right?
Yeah. Right.
And
Right.
you still feel that? You still feel that millennials are seen that way too?
No, I think Gen Z has done a wonderful job of taking the pressure off of us. No, I'm kidding, but no, I think for me a vulnerability, it may go back to what I was starting to share about this mindset of like visibility equaling value. I think that I personally put a lot of pressure on myself. I don't know if other millennials do, but I put a lot of pressure on myself to speak up and kind of be on and be prepared and, show up and maybe overcompensate for the stereotype.
Yeah.
And as a woman, I think I probably also
Yeah.
overcompensate for
Yeah.
that stereotype. So I don't know. I think that's my vulnerability, is like learning how to be vulnerable, and that we don't have to have this armor on, and that there is power in when we can relate and share and connect.
Yeah.
And
That's
maybe
good.
making up from the earlier stages in your career where people thought you were
Yeah. Yeah.
the liability and not the
Yeah.
asset. Yeah.
Well, and he knows, the person who told me this knows that it stuck with me, so I can share it. And if he heard it, he would giggle. But, I said, someone told me you'd never be taken seriously till your 30s. I also had another person, tell me early on in my career, like, you're like a golden retriever. You come over, you want to talk to me all the
Yeah. Yeah.
time. You
Yeah.
want me to pet your head.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, you're doing great. You're doing great. Like, go do your work. And I'm
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
and so those types of feedback that I was getting in my 20s I think I just really over-indexed in
Yeah,
some
yeah, yeah,
spaces, and now I'm finding that middle. I think I'm in this season where I'm like, what does that middle look like where I can be more authentic? And I really think that may be where millennials struggle is like, you know, finding that authenticity and being able to show up versus, trying to show up in a way where we're accepted.
yeah, sure.
I guess I never
Yeah.
really thought about it, but I really do like the analogies. You're translating from both of them, which causes a lot of emotional drain. So
Yeah.
I have another question for you, and Tim, I want your thoughts on this too because I
Yeah.
know you've done some
Okay.
research in this area. So Jody, are seeing now millennials are now leading sometimes Xers. So millennials have piped up, and now they are the supervisor,
Yeah. Yeah.
maybe over an Xer. And so what is that dynamic? How does that dynamic work for you as a millennial leading someone older than you?
Yeah. I have led Xers and I've led a boomer. And I've led Gen Z. I've led them all. So I have learned to, you actually touched on this, Tim. You said that it's really about like what people value. You started to kind of go
Yeah.
there more than their
Yeah.
generation. And
Yeah.
so in leading different generations, what I've learned is I have to challenge my assumptions about what works for me, working for other people.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I have to check in with what they value, what do they believe is important about how they work and how they get things done. I think my Gen Xers love autonomy and
Yeah.
freedom.
Yep.
And if I get a little too involved, they start to feel like I'm micromanaging
Yeah.
much more than my millennial or Gen Z team members who see that as me being supportive
Yes.
and checking in and being
Brilliant.
empathetic and caring. Gen X is like, what do you want? Like,
Yeah.
why are you
That's right.
doing this? And boomers, I take a different approach, And so I think it all comes down to like, what does that individual need? And just being mindful that the way that they came up in the workplace is different than the way I did. And I have to
Mhm.
take some time to understand that to be able to lead them well.
That's good emotional
Good.
intelligence.
And
Yeah,
I
it is.
also just, I, maybe it's because again, the millennial thing was seen as a cuss word, but I'm like, I don't think about my age at work.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I don't talk about it. I don't want to talk about theirs. I don't think like you're a Gen Z, so I need to lead you this way, right? But you can tell that people
Yeah.
have different needs and
Yeah.
there are
Yeah.
trends, but I
It's true.
think you got to make it work for each person.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Tim, what are your thoughts on that from
Yeah.
stuff?
Well, Jody, you've been talking about vulnerability and transparency and so forth. Let me say to listeners who might be from the millennial generation, you do your work well and produce results, and the boomers and the Xers or whoever's in charge will look at you and say, you be as vulnerable as you want. You're producing results. So always start with get the job done, and you've earned your right to be transparent and human and talk about, hey, maybe we need to back off on this just a little bit, wait another week or whatever. Jody and Susan, I had the undeserved privilege of surveying over 400 millennials. And then I did focus groups across the country with the millennial generation, my kids' generation. Two or three things I found real quick before we wrap this thing up. One, Susan, you already brought this up. The oldest millennials are now in midlife, so they're not the new kids on the block. They are seasoned veterans. They have families, maybe, and mortgage payments and so forth. So they've joined the workforce in more ways than one. I think I found in my research they can feel their workplace doesn't communicate with them or support them to the level they need because they have come in different, even though they're very experienced now. They need that communication support. Jody touched on this, but we got to make sure that communication lines for all people are crystal clear. Many millennials told me in the focus groups they have a toxic workplace, which is so sad, but it happens, especially with older generations that don't have any sense of emotion at all. Let's just get to the bottom line. They're workaholics, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes millennials are suffering from mental health concerns. Now, Gen Z really brought that to the forefront, but the millennials also grew up in a digital age where they were overwhelmed with information on the screens. So that's one big idea. Another one, I kind of touched on this for a second, but millions of millennials, not all, but millions, feel the American dream has eluded them.
Interesting.
They're asking about the home that they thought they would have already and they don't. The boomers 30 years ago were talking about midlife crises. Some are entering a midlife crisis, which is brought on not because they're failures, but because they had such a high expectation of themselves on where they'd be at 39 or 40 or whatever. And now they're not. But it was their over or maybe unrealistic expectation. But just know, if you're leading a millennial, Xers listening maybe, just know they might be feeling that, I'm not what I thought I would be by this point. Yeah. So, and then the last thought real quick, Susan, before I turn it back over to you.
Yeah.
They can feel that their workplaces don't really allow for work-life balance. They talk, but they don't walk. You know what I'm saying? So we all know that's the right thing to say, amen, brother, that sort of thing. So they're often seeking more flexibility because that screams trust to them. Fairness is huge. I just want this to be fair and equitable. If you're going to give him that perk, how about me? And by the way, Jodie, I'm really glad you brought up the fact that you're not a millennial, but you're female. And sometimes females they feel they need to say yes, 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 because if it's going to hurt their career if they say no, like, you're not up to it. I knew it, that sort of thing. And I can't speak for females, but I think you must feel that pressure. It seems easier for a guy to move ahead. And then one last thought. I heard from some millennials, they said, doggone it, the workplace still treats us like rookies. And we've been around for 14 years now or whatever. I say this, listeners, just for one point. Lead with better understanding. They're humans. They're great humans. They have a lot to offer. They can be translators, but they're going to do better if they have a boss that's understanding. So I'll stop there.
That's so good.
Love it.
That's good. And Jodie, one last question as we wrap up. If I'm your leader, right, and I'm leading millennials, what's the best advice you would give me as a Gen Xer to lead you well?
I may lean into my psychology background a little bit here, if that's okay. But
Yeah.
I think the big thing is we have to check our assumptions. We just have to as leaders. I think millennials, sometimes the way we show up can be really misunderstood. It can be misunderstood and seen as overly emotional and kind of whiny. And can we just focus on the results? I think we have to check what stories we're telling ourselves about people and slow down. Consider what else could be true, check those assumptions, and reframe how we're thinking. If our mental model as a leader gets carried away and we take, the behavior of being quiet in a meeting and we take that and we run with it and we say, they must not care, they must lack initiative, then you've run away with an assumption and you need to check in and reframe what you're thinking. So I think that would be my advice for leaders in general, is just really check in and ask individually what those folks need, because I may be different, Tim, than the folks that you're hearing from,
Yeah.
and
Right.
I would say, I have people that are peers that reach out to me and say, how are you at that level? How have you had this, success? I thought I'd be where you are by this point. And I think it's all about mindset, right? It's all about mindset, and it's all about your beliefs and what's driving you. And if we don't understand that, it's going to be really hard to lead people well.
Yeah.
So good.
Very, very well put. Yeah.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Powerful conversation today. Appreciate you, Jodie, being here today. Talk about vulnerabilities as a millennial or a Gen Y, or as some people would say. Tim, as always, appreciate your insights, your knowledge, and just the wealth of information you bring our audience. If you're listening and you're saying to yourself, I need to know more about this. I want to lead teams. I have a team of multi-generation. I need coaching. I want a workshop, because we do workshops on this all the time. Reach out to us. Just in the show notes, you'll see information on how to get in touch with us. So we'd love to hear from you. We appreciate you being here. We know you have a choice in podcasts. If you feel this podcast has benefited you, or maybe you know someone it would benefit, we appreciate the share and the like and following, and just appreciate you being with us. And we'll see you on the next Generations at Work podcast.